One. Yo, what's up, YouTube? It's your boy Noname back at it again with another, or in this case, first Giants collab video. Today I got with me the Entertainah, Chris, the Entertainah talking sports. You guys know him. If you don't, go into the description down below. His YouTube channel, Twitter, links will be down there. Make sure you follow him. Chris, welcome aboard, and thank you for coming on board, man.
Absolutely, man. I always like to talk Giants with anybody in the community, man. And yeah, you're doing a great job on your channel. And yeah, I'm always open to talking Giants. I'm looking forward to it.
But thank you. So today was a weird day for me, right? I mean, it's already weird with the given lockdown situation and whatnot. But it was weird because I woke up, I was eating my cereal, I go on Twitter, and then I see Jordan Rannon and Dan Duggan tweeting out, oh, the two newest members of the Giants, guys that literally signed their physical contracts just days ago, yesterday, in fact. Now those contracts are altered, and, you know, cap space has been shifted around, money has been shifted around in order to make an extra $10 million in these cap space. So the Giants could possibly make more moves or do something else. What do you think about that, Chris?
Yeah, I don't want to use the wrong terminology. One guy on my video, he wrote that you should have said amendment. Either way, like you said, there's an alteration, there's a change. And what it's approximately, at least from what I gathered, close to $20 million that they're going to have to be able to spend potentially on a free agent. And it's going to be interesting to see what they do here, because obviously you remember at the beginning of free agency, Gettleman said he wanted to set aside $20 million for in-season moves, and everybody called him a liar. They're like, well, that's not the case. Well, now, if they don't do anything else because of these alterations, he will have $20 million set aside for in-season moves. In terms of am I a fan of it, I'm really not. I like the old structure. It's not that this isn't going to cripple us. It's going to add $5 million to next year's cap. And I think about $5 million the year after that, if I'm not mistaken. So it's not the end of the world, especially with the cap going up. But I didn't see the need to make changes unless you plan on bringing in another piece, or you plan to extend the player already on the roster, whatever it may be. And maybe that'll be the case. We'll have to wait and see. I would say Marcus Golden is probably the most realistic guy that they'd sign, being that he played here last year. I think you'd be a lot cheaper than a guy like Clowney, and it would still give you some money to do some things in season.
I agree with you. You brought up a point I never thought of before, extending some players. Like, maybe the Giants want to get ahead of the curve with Barkley and maybe extend him. Whatever the case is, I didn't see it coming. And I'm on the same page with that. I don't like the move because I thought we were set. You know, I thought free agency for the most part was over. I like the way the contracts were fixed because it allowed flexibility down the line. You know, not only to cut bait if they were bad, but let's say they're good, they stay on the team. We still have flexibility to extend to Daniel Jones if he pans out, which, you know, it looks like he will. That's what I don't like about the new restructuring. And I don't mind if these guys are on the team for 3 years because they're both, like 25, 26. So it's not the situation we were in 4 years ago with Jenkins and Snacks and Vernon. It's a much better age-wise. I just don't like that the flexibility is gone. But extending a player is really interesting. They could be going for Barkley. But right now, I really think they might be making a move for Clowney because you got $20 million there. And let's be honest, that's a lot of money. I don't see any team going into the season with $20 million available to spend.
Yeah, I mean, it's possible. You know, we'll have to see how it all plays out. It could be Clowney. I'm not going to rule it out. Obviously, the Giants were linked to Clowney before free agency. It was said that the Giants were potentially interested in him, and the Giants were linked to a lot of people. And a lot of the people that they were said to be linked to, they signed. You know, they didn't sign Van Noy, but they were said to be linked to Bradbury. They were said to be linked to Martinez. They signed both of those guys. So I wouldn't rule it out. I still think something's peculiar with Golden. You have not heard anything about Marcus Golden in terms of outside interest, which is surprising me. He's coming up a 10.5 sack season. He's, I'm not in love with the guy. I don't think he's the perfect schematic fit, but you would think he'd bring some value to an outside team. He's still relatively young. So that, I always thought in the back of my head, it was always possible Golden could be coming back. And this may be what leads to it. So I'm still leaning Golden, but I wouldn't rule out it. You know, I know people are going to be saying things like Clowney, potentially trade for Yannick Ngakoue. There's definitely other possibilities out there. Or just keep the money for in-season moves like Gettleman said from the start. So I think everything's open. Another guy, one of my subscribers brought up that I thought was interesting was Logan Ryan. We could use a slot corner. He's still out there. So there's a number of guys they could look into. The offensive line market's kind of thin. But yeah, I wouldn't rule out Clowney.
The reason I say Clowney, and you brought it up, was because before free agency began, Giants were linked to him. And then, like you said, we signed guys who were linked to. Every guy that we signed, for the most part, some way, shape, or form, has a link to the Giants through the coaching staff or a link through rumors or something, some type of reports. I don't know if you remember, but on the very first free agency day, right, like that very first day of free agency, you were on one of your live streams, and a lot of people were going into the chat that Clowney to the Giants, whether it was a fake report, a rumor, or a fake signing. But that day, I remember specifically, like on NFL Network, a lot of these reporters on NFL Network were saying Giants and Clowney are in heavy conversations. And that's why I'm like, right now, I can see that happening just because as of right now, we have a good amount of money left. But realistically, Golden's probably the guy because I don't see why any team wouldn't sign him. There's definitely teams out there that need a bit of pass rush help. He might not be your number one choice, but he certainly proved that he could work in a system,
Yeah, and when you look at the pass rusher market, after everybody was franchise tagged, it was really thin. He was probably one of the top 3 or 4 options out there, and you didn't hear anything about him. So that's what leads me to believe that he said in season he wanted to come back here. I could be wrong, but it leads me to believe that he was probably waiting for things to, take place with all the salary structuring and everything else. And maybe there was a reason why it took this long, because I did read after I made my video, another tweet came out. I think it was from Rannon that said that this was in the works for a couple of weeks. It just didn't come out till today. So maybe, maybe he knew that, and maybe they said, listen, we're going to have to wait a little while, but we'll get you on the team.
I was just going to ask, because I saw that tweet, I was just going to ask, do you think maybe there's a behind the doors deal, which is very possible, between Golden and the Giants? They're like, listen, you don't sign with anybody. We got you. We'll take care of you. Just give us some time. Because even though he's more of a scheme rusher, the fact that the Giants this year don't exactly have a scheme, both on offense and defense, we've heard multiple times from Judge and Graham that, hey, we're not going to be running any particular defense. We're just going to go in on a week-by-week basis, see what happens, see which defense matches up best with the opposing offense. And in that case, Golden can work out, he can work out pretty well for the Giants.
Yeah. I was never opposed to Golden for the right price. I was opposed to Golden for what I thought he was going to get. I thought he was going to get a 3 or 4 year deal for $12 or $13 million a year. It's starting to look more and more likely that he's going to go for less than that. And you might even be able to get him on a 1 year deal. Because if I'm Marcus Golden, I'm looking at the salary cap next year, and I'm saying to myself, I'd rather play in a 1 year deal. And if I have another 10, 11 sack season, I'm going to make $16, $17 million a year with the increase in salary. So if you could get Golden on a 1 year deal or even a 2 year deal for $10 or $11 million a year, I'm all for it. It's another veteran guy that you could bring in here, a guy that's shown that he could get after the quarterback. I'd be completely for it. And it might be, and I think it would make a lot of Giants fans happy. It would be a nice cap off to this free agency period.
I would, yeah. Personally, I like Golden, like both as a player and as a guy, he seems like a really good guy, matches the personality and the character the Giants seem to be going for in the locker room over there. It would definitely be a nice way to cap off free agency. And what you said links nicely into my next topic. If you were Marcus Golden, or if you were any player really that's still on the market, looking for a 1 year, a very short-term deal is in your favor money-wise. So is that why you think Leonard Williams and this long-term deal isn't working out? Do you think it's on Williams' side or Gettleman's side, or maybe both? Because if I'm Leonard Williams, I'm not letting go of that franchise tag. I'm getting paid a lot more than
I'll tell you what, man. If I was an agent for one of these players right now, looking at the structure of the salary cap for next year, I would tell him, try to get a 1 year deal. I would tell him, play under the franchise tag, especially if you're Leonard Williams. Leonard Williams, we all know, is getting overpaid. I like Leonard Williams, but he's not worth $16, $17 million. And what is the incentive? I mean, I know you get more security. If he gets hurt, he misses out on money. But what is the incentive for Leonard Williams to sign a 4 or 5 year deal at $14 million a year? The way I look at it, if I'm Leonard Williams, even if I have a year like I had last year where I don't kill it, with the 15% increase, I'm worth at least $14 million in next year's market. So for him, I don't see an incentive for him to sign a long-term deal. I'm going to take my $17 million fully guaranteed. And if I have a 5 or 6 sack season, if I play great, I'm going to get $17 or $18 million on a 4 or 5 year deal with the increased market. So if I was an agent, I would be telling my players to try to sign short-term deals. And I think that's why we've seen that. I think that's why you saw Conklin sign a short-term deal. I think that's why you saw Bradbury sign a short-term deal. And I think it's the right approach from the player's perspective.
And not even only short-term deals, but these are relatively cheap deals when we look at it, right? Especially when you talk about Conklin. In my opinion, the Bradbury deal was cheap considering the corner market, how saturated it is, considering what Byron Jones got. So, players are really making very smart tactical moves right now. But getting back to Williams real quick, yeah, we all know he's overpaid. I don't know if the tag is going to get rescinded, but I bring it up because, of course, we signed a tackle from Tennessee. We have more defensive tackles on the team than needed. It is the strongest position on the team by far, definitely on the defense by far. I'm seeing either Williams or Thompson, in talks for probably getting out. You know what I'm saying? Like maybe one of these guys are going to be gone, whether it's a trade by Thompson or a Tomlinson or rescinding the tag on Williams, because we've seen Gettleman rescind the tag before, Josh Norman being the last one.
Yeah, I mentioned that in one of my videos that he's done that in the past. That's definitely a possibility. And the one guy that I've consistently mentioned, other than Evan Ingram, who I don't think they're going to be able to trade because he's still got, he's in the walking boot, is Dalvin Tomlinson. And I love Dalvin Tomlinson. Dalvin Tomlinson was my favorite player in last year's defense. But the fact of the matter is, if Leonard Williams is in the long-term plans, which I guess we don't know yet, maybe they're working on a long-term deal. Maybe they only plan on keeping him for 1 year. But if he's in the long-term plans, I don't see you committing $30 million to two defensive tackles. I just don't see it. So I think it would be in the team's best interest if they could get a decent package for Tomlinson to make a move and maybe try to get back that draft pick that you lost for Leonard Williams. If you could get a mid to late third round pick, being that you're already pretty strong at that position. You look at this roster with Leonard Williams, you got, you obviously, like you said, we brought in the guy from Tennessee. You got Dexter Lawrence, you got BJ Hill, McIntosh. So they have a lot of guys that are already beefy up front. So, yeah, I would look to trade Tomlinson if the right deal presented itself.
Now I'm going to ask you like a purely opinion-based question. And then after, you finish with your opinion, you could probably get into the facts. Straight up, Chris, who would you rather, Tomlinson or Williams? Because for me, I know Williams is a more versatile player. I know, for the sake of playing devil's advocate, he was double teamed last year 64% of the times, which allowed guys like Tomlinson to shine. But I would prefer Dalvin. Part of it is because, he's Giants, he's homegrown. Part of it is because I feel like he would demand less money, but also because, Williams, while he helped the run defense, he didn't help improve, the defense as a whole that much. You go back, you can watch the tape, and my favorite line, I can't remember who said it, is that the tape never lies. Statistically, he helped the run defense, but running backs were still tearing us up in the second half.
Yeah, no, it's for equal money, I'm probably going Leonard Williams. But if I'm getting Dalvin Tomlinson cheaper, I'm taking Dalvin Tomlinson. Plus, he's a homegrown Giant, like you said, and I'm a fan of his. I like him. The reason I bring up the prospect of trading Dalvin and not Leonard, just because I think Dalvin has a much stronger trade market right now because he's not making what Leonard Williams makes. If I'm a team, what's my incentive to take Leonard Williams when he's making $16, $17 million a year on a 1-year deal? So that's why. But if everything was equal, I might be inclined to keep Dalvin Tomlinson instead of Leonard Williams.
And yeah, man, I completely agree with you. And you said we have a lot of tackles there on the interior defensive line. There's a chance we might even go defensive line in the draft. Now, I'm not talking, first pick. I'm talking maybe in the mid rounds, some of the later rounds. I've seen mocks mocking guys like Chauncey Rivers to us, who is a mid-round defensive tackle. We all hope that we don't take Derek Brown or Javon Kinlaw or somebody like that in the first round. If we do, I don't know how I'm going to react. But is there any way you see Dave Gettleman still going back and taking another defensive tackle or maybe a position that we wouldn't consider a immediate need in the draft
early
right now?
In the draft?
Just anywhere, let me say earlier to mid.
Maybe in the fourth, I could see him taking a defensive tackle. I'd be shocked if he takes one before then. I could see him maybe reaching a little bit on a wide receiver earlier than I would like. Maybe the second round. I think that's a possibility. But no, I don't think he would take a defensive tackle in the first 3 rounds. Maybe at pick 99 if he loved one. Definitely not in the first 2 rounds. If he does, I'll be pissed off.
Yeah, I mean, we would all be, right? But it comes back to the report saying he's on the hot seat, which kind of makes a lot of sense, right? I find it extremely coincidental that one day we get a report saying Gettleman is on the hot seat, and the very next day we get news that contracts are being restructured in what looks to be, right? Of course, we're inferring here. What looks to be to make space for another free agent signing, because Gettleman might be in a win now mode. Now we both know win now is not the Giants. It's not going to work out. And if that's what Gettleman is going for, he's for sure going to get fired at the end of this year. But it's kind of, it's kind of coincidental. Like one day you get that, the next day you get the restructuring. So that's why I kind of brought up, like, are we going to trade somebody? Are we looking to make moves? Do you think it was a coincidence, or what do you think about that?
Because I didn't know initially, but after I made the video, I saw the report by Jordan Ryan that this has been in the works for a few weeks. Now, it's possible that a few weeks ago, Dave Gettleman was told, you need to try to win now, and he knew he was going to restructure this 2 weeks ago, and he had to wait for a certain time frame to be able to bring in one more piece. That's possible. But I think it is a coincidence, the fact that this came out today, a day after that report, because of what I said about Jordan Ryan. And this has been in the works for a couple of weeks. I really don't think that's the case with Gettleman. I could be wrong. I really don't feel like Dave Gettleman is taking the same approach that Jerry Reese did, especially when you look at the players he brought in. I think it was long-term thinking. I could be wrong, though. I could be completely wrong. We're going to have to wait and see how it all plays out, and see who else they may bring in. But I will say one thing. The Leonard Williams trade was definitely short-term thinking. And that trade, I think, was definitely him trying to save his and Pat Shurmur's job. That I will say for sure. But as far as this offseason goes, I don't think he's taking a short-term approach.
I'm inclined to believe you. Like, I'm inclined with you there, specifically because when you look at it, too, it's more than just Gettleman moves, right? It's Judge moves. It's Graham moves. The coaches are definitely a lot more involved than they were years beforehand. Like, yeah, Shurmur was involved for the Daniel Jones pick. I'm positive about that. But past that, really, I don't see any really coach influence type of moves from Gettleman versus this offseason. Almost every, if not every move has the fingerprints of the coaching staff all over it. So, I definitely like that Gettleman, like that report from Glazer said, he had to look inside and change some of his methods. I feel like he's done that, and I'm glad that he's done that. It's just that, what would you say to Giants fans that just, not necessarily the ones that will hate Gettleman no matter what, but the ones that are on the fence, that they're like, he hasn't had a good track record in free agency. He's only been good in the draft. He does what he wants.
Yeah,
what do you have to say?
I try to be fair. I think some people may view me as very pro Gettleman. I just try to be fair. I recognize Gettleman makes some mistakes. There's no doubt about it. I guess I'm kind of on the fence. But I'm definitely not somebody who just bashes him for everything he does. In terms of free agency in the past, I say it all the time. Yeah, he's made some mistakes. I think he was forced into making some of those mistakes. If you're being fair, he inherited a team with nothing, and he had to bring in a left tackle. He got the best one he could get with Nate Solder. It hasn't worked out, but I can't really fault him for that. The trade for Alec Ogletree was a bad one. He didn't take into account the salary and everything else. It was a bad one. We didn't give up much, a fifth-round pick, and at the time, Ogletree was a name. But the fact Ogletree was making $12 million a year, that was a bad trade. I cannot defend him on that. The Leonard Williams trade was horrible. But as far as this offseason goes, I think there's been changes in his approach. You go back and look at his drafts, and I can't judge the draft yet, but you go back and look at his drafts from years past. Like you said, Shurmur may have definitely had an influence on the quarterback, which makes sense. Shurmur was a quarterback guy, right? So they wanted to bring in a quarterback that they felt could fit what Shurmur does. But outside of that, there was a clear pattern. He was always bringing in defensive tackles, right? With B.J. Hill and R.J. McIntosh and Dexter Lawrence. So I think those were 100% Gettleman guys. I can't judge the draft yet, but as far as free agency goes so far, every free agent they brought in outside of Bradbury has a connection to somebody in the coaching staff. So to me, I think Gettleman had less to do with these moves than the coaching staff did.
Yeah, I agree with you. And to be honest with you, before these moves happened, right? Because we all, Giants fans in general, we were all speculating that, hey, there's definitely going to be a change made because that had to happen in order for us to get the coach that we got. Judge came aboard. We all knew there was going to be changes made in free agency and whatnot. It was kind of like a caveat that had to happen if the Giants wanted any success of getting a new head coach, because that was one of the things, and the reports saying that head coaches didn't want to come to the Giants because Gettleman has an iron fist. We knew it was going to change the minute that Judge came in. We heard how he spoke in that. To be honest with you, and I'm just kind of going, back in time here, I was worried about the fact that, hey, maybe these coaches are getting a little too much power in deciding who we sign. But seeing how it is so far, we haven't seen them on the field. As of right now, I'm happy. I'm happy in the fact that it really looks like a team is building a team, if that makes any sense.
I'm completely with you. At the end of the day, Joe Judge is the future of this team. Even if you really even if you're in love with Gettleman, I'm not, but there's some people that are in love with him. There's some people that hate him. I like him. I think he does some good things. But Gettleman's not the part of the future of this team. I think Gettleman was the guy that they came in here to fix a mess, right? He's older. He's recovering from cancer. I can't see him, even if he does a great job, I don't think he's going to be the GM for more than 2 or 3 years. So Gettleman's not the part of the future of this team. Joe Judge hopefully is. And you want Joe Judge to be comfortable with the players you're bringing in and the program that he's trying to build. I think Gettleman, if nothing else, hopefully got us a franchise quarterback for the next 15 years. He cleared the cap situation. He fixed a lot of the problems that we had before he got in here. You could argue a lot of the things he did, but I don't think he's part of the future. I think Judge is. So I think it's important for Judge to be on board with all the decisions that are being made this offseason.
Yeah, that point right there, he fixed the cap situation. We're out of cap hell. It took a while, but the Giants are officially out of cap hell this year. You know what I'm saying? We don't have any terrible contracts on the books right now that are holding us down and whatnot. And part of that, well, I guess we do have one terrible contract, it being Solder, but he's going to be gone after this year, in my opinion. But speaking of Solder, right? And I realized this as I kept talking to myself, thinking about the offensive line and whatnot. Are the Giants just a right tackle and center away from having a good offensive line? Not a great one, just a good, stable offensive line. Are we a center and right tackle away? And if that's true, Gettleman did, in that sense, fix the offensive line because it's better than what he
as crazy
he
as it might
with.
sound. And I know this might sound crazy. The offensive line is much better than it was when he first got here. You go back and look, the offensive line ranked 30th, 31st, 32nd. Last year, I think they were 22, 23. So they're still bad. But they're better, and it's incremental change. But they still have a long way to go. And like I've expressed time and time again, if they don't take one in the first round, they got to take offensive linemen early. They got to get a new center, and like you said, they got to get a new, hopefully, left tackle when Solder leaves. But they're going to need 2 tackles over the next 2 years. They're going to need a right tackle and a left tackle, and a center. And they're going to, whether that's in free agency or the draft, like next year, they're going to have some money. They might be able to bring in a tackle via free agency, but I think they definitely need to get a young tackle in this year's draft, no doubt about it. And he'll probably play the right tackle his first year and then maybe shift them over.
Are we a tackle and center in a way, though? Let's just, I guess, put ourselves in a one-year world, right? This upcoming year. Let's say that Solder, maybe he fully recovers from the surgery he had last season. I don't want to give Solder too many excuses because he's getting paid a lot of money. And when you're getting paid that much money, I don't want to give you excuses. But he was coming off a surgery. I don't know if many people notice. Yeah. I'm sure you do. He has his own personal problems, like his wife is facing cancer and stuff like that. His kid is facing cancer. So let's say that he fully recovers from surgery and maybe he gets into the right mental space. He plays average, right? That's all we're asking for. Some nice average, maybe a little bit above average tackle play. Are we then a right tackle and center away, or is there even maybe more work to be done?
If you remember Solder's first year here, first 8 games, he was horrible. I think he gave up 8 sacks in the first 8 games. Last 8 games, he gave up only 1 sack. The offensive line was much better the second half of the year, and I actually think it gave Giants fans a lot of hope going into last year. Now, whether or not, I'm not going to, like you said, I'm not trying to make excuses for Solder either, but if he can get back to the way he was over those last 8 games, I think not only will it make Solder better, I think it'll make Hernandez better. I think Hernandez played worse last year because of how poor Solder was playing. So, yes, if they bring in a solid tackle in the draft this year, find a center in the 2nd or 3rd round, absolutely, I think we could have at least an average offensive line. I would like to think Hernandez is going to play better this year, and I could depend on Zeitler. I think they need to definitely address the center in the first 2 or 3 rounds, and same thing with the tackle. I don't know if they're going to have a good O-line this year because I do think it'll take possibly a little time for a young offensive lineman to, get to where he needs to be. And if they don't take a tackle early on in the first, more than likely, you're not going to have him starting, at least the tackle. The center might very well start day 1, but the tackle, Fleming might start or Gates might start to open up the year, and then they, may gradually transition. So I still think the offensive line might be able to become close to average, but I don't think you're going to have a superior offensive line. Of course, the coaching staff hopefully can have a lot to do with improving it as well. Mark Colombo did a great job with the Cowboys, so hopefully he comes over here and helps the O-line.
That's a great point you brought up with Hernandez playing alongside Solder. It really does affect this. I don't think a lot of people realize the offensive line is its own unit. If one person messes up, it messes up the entire flow of that unit. So Solder, who works directly with Hernandez, and Hernandez, who works directly with Solder, if one of them is playing bad, it affects the other. And that's supremely something that people don't realize. And on another side of the team, special teams, for example, I have faith in Aldrich Rosas. Like, I really think he's going to improve next year. And part of the reason is because last year, Zach Diassi, and I love this guy, he's the veteran on the team right now.
Yeah.
Well, he's off the team right now, I'm sure. One of the reasons Aldrich Rosas had a terrible year last year was because Diassi had a terrible year. His snaps were terrible most of the time. And anytime Zach Diassi had a bad snap to Rosas would miss a kick. And it's because they work as a unit.
And that's why in my 7-round mock draft, I had us taking a long snapper. And a lot of people, I think they replaced Diassi the last 3 or 4 games, and you saw Rosas, I don't think, missed a kick. So, yeah, I mean, football is a team game. People don't realize that. That's why I know a lot of people realize that, but some people don't. And it's why I often point to saying that, yeah, the quarterback's the most important position, but the quarterback's not going to succeed unless you give him the pieces he needs to succeed. And that's why I constantly express trying to, improve the offensive line, get the quarterback weapons. Eli Manning was obviously at his best when he had a strong line.
Mm-hmm. I mean, you know what? You could argue, and this is just me kind of poking fun. Eli's best year, 2011, he had a terrible O-line. I will say that. He should have really won MVP, man, that year. I'm just throwing that out there.
I say it all the time.
Eli in 2011.
I throw stats out the window. Do me a favor, anybody listening to this podcast, find me a quarterback in the history of the NFL that threw for almost 5,000 yards, won a Super Bowl with an offensive line that ranked near the bottom of the league. They were dead last in the league in rushing, and they were, I think, 30th in total defense. So you find me a quarterback that had that supporting cast that even has ever made the playoffs, let alone win a Super Bowl.
That's another thing. The defense was ranked bottom of the league, right? People don't realize this. And I hate it when people say, oh, Eli won the 2 Super Bowls because of his defenses. Listen, I'll give you the first one. It still takes a quarterback to make the plays that he made in the first one. But 2011, that defense was trash, no way around it. It heated up in the playoffs. And by the time they got to the Super Bowl, it was good. Yes. But for him to get them into the playoffs and then work his way through the playoffs to get to the Super Bowl, that defense was not it.
The defense was banged up all year. They had a lot of injuries. JPP was obviously very good, but overall, the defense was not good. A lot of people have short memories, but Eli Manning carried that team in the regular season. The postseason, they became a team, but they don't even sniff the postseason without Eli Manning and Victor Cruz. Victor Cruz, of course, was very instrumental in that run as well. Eli Manning that year, I don't care what the stats say, should have won the MVP. The guy, I think, had 8 fourth-quarter comebacks out of their 9 wins or something like that. It was something ridiculous. He set a record. That's
when he became Mr. Fourth Quarter.
Here's what I'll say about Eli Manning. I think he was a good quarterback, regular season quarterback, his entire career. I'm not going to say great. I think he was good. That 1 year, he was elite. He was as good as anybody that year. And he put the team on his back that year. He's why we won that Super Bowl. I don't think anybody could deny it, or at least the primary reason why we won that Super Bowl.
He's a good regular season quarterback, and I will say he's an elite postseason quarterback. Whenever he's in the postseason, he shows up. Going back to that Green Bay game in 2016 or 2017, technically, but a 2016 year, Eli showed up, the receivers didn't. And speaking of receivers with Cruz, just, random question. Who was your favorite Giants receiver?
Well, obviously I love Cruz for that, that short spurt that we had him. Everybody did. But in terms of, a guy that I saw for a while, he just wasn't here long enough. I think I'll go with Toomer, man. Amani Toomer was always reliable. He was a great locker room guy. I go with Toomer. I think Toomer is my favorite Giant receiver.
Toomer just has it all in terms of being a great receiver for a franchise. He has the amount of years there, the duration. He has the stats. He shows up on the field. He's a great personality off the field and in the locker room. It's a pretty good pick. The only reason I go with Cruz is because, and I say this all the time, I was very lucky in the year that I really became a football fan was the Super Bowl year for the Giants. So that Cruz was my favorite player at that time. He drew me in. It's kind of sad to see what happened, with the injuries and whatnot. But do you think we have another Cruz type receiver in terms of impact, not the way he plays, but impact
they're not very
in
similar
Slayton?
In terms of type of wide receiver. I actually think Shepard, if he could ever stay healthy, not that he's as good as Cruz, but I think there's similar types of receivers, guys that could play on both the inside and the out. But I do. Yeah. In terms of
just impact-wise, I'm talking about.
I want to say yes, but at the same time, I don't want to jump the gun. But year one, I was very impressed with Slayton, and I only think he's going to get better in this system. I think you can make an argument that he didn't fit the Shermer system at all. The Shermer system is all, short passing routes, crossing patterns, West Coast style offense. This is a vertical offense now that he's in. So you would think Slayton's going to only get better. Obviously, he's probably going to command more double teams than last year because teams know about him. So we'll see how he adjusts on the fly and if they add another receiver to try to help him out. But yeah, I think Slayton could be in for a big year and a big career with the New York Giants if he could stay healthy.
The thing I'm afraid with Slayton is that I know he can get better if he sees the field more, right? Like if he sees the field as a legitimate starter this year, he's only going to go up. What I'm scared of is if the Giants do bring in another receiver, I'm afraid that maybe his playtime will be cut. Maybe even if they take somebody early, which I really don't want. But let's say like even second or third round, I feel like if they bring in somebody, maybe his playtime is going to be cut and he's not going to be developed and he just falls back into the pack. That's what I'm afraid
worried about it because I don't think Tate's a part of the future. Tate's definitely part of the present. Maybe on the team next year, I'm not sure. I think he carries a $5 million dead cap hit. They'll have to weigh that. I was never in favor of the Tate signing. I think they brought him in for a locker room presence, but I don't think it ever added up. But they also didn't know they were going to end up with Darius Slayton, in fairness to the Giants. But, yeah, I mean, you could argue, even though they don't have an elite receiver, it could take away a little bit from his playing time, especially if Evan Ingram could stay healthy. But regardless, I think I still really like him. He may not put up glorious stats this year because of that, especially if they add, say, T. Higgins in the second round or Chase Claypool in the third. But I'm still on the Slayton train, man. I still think Slayton is going to get an opportunity to succeed here long term, and I think he's going to do a good job. I mean, him and Daniel Jones had great chemistry last year.
They were ranked, I think, and I can't believe the NFL actually ranks this, but I think it's like, top QB wide receiver rookie duos or something. They were like up there with Andrew Luck and T.Y. Hilton.
Yeah,
like they had
he
a
had the one
connection.
great
That's
game
not
with
to be
Eli.
argued,
I think it was against the Eagles, if I'm not mistaken, where Eli threw a couple of deep balls to him. But outside of that, everything was with Daniel Jones. I mean, the Bucs game, he had the huge game against the Jets. He had the Lions. Yeah, so I think Slayton and Jones got something. And when you got chemistry with your quarterback, that's incredibly valuable.
I really hope he does get the playing time, but a receiver that I want to talk about that sort of not being talked about in the Giants community right now is Sterling Shepard. And you brought it up. He needs to stay healthy. He needs to stay on the field if, he wants to be a part of the Giants' future. And I like him, once again, going back to the homegrown Giants selection and whatnot. But I'm worried for him because of the concussions. Like, we saw the reports at the end of last year saying that his family wanted him to retire. Now, I guess two things. Do you think he should have retired? And how long more do you see Shepard on the
I'll tell you what, man, when I
field?
first read that I'll put it this way. I would not have batted an eye if he retired, especially when his family and his wife is saying that. I wouldn't have batted an eye. And it's not just with the Giants. He's had concussion problems through high school. I remember reading a report. He had like 8 concussions throughout college and high school. And I hope he stays healthy. I love the kid. He's a great blocker. That's a very underrated attribute of his game. Tough football player. He can make big plays. Just can't stay on the field, and he's had concussion issues. I hate to say it. I think I'd be surprised if he lasts more than 3 or 4 more years in the league. I hate to say that, and I hope I'm wrong. I hope he has a glorious career and he's a Giant legend. But he just seems to be one of those players that you see he has all the talent in the world, and he gives you spurts, but he could never just put it all together.
He is such a good player for the Giants. You said it, a good blocker. Like, anytime Saquon Barkley breaks a big run, guys, whoever's listening, try and look out into the tape that you could find, and you'll see Shepard out there making an incredible block that allows Saquon to go the distance. Shepard is such a good receiver for the Giants, and he's an underrated route runner also. He has a second gear that he doesn't get to all the time, but when he does get to it, he could get to the end zone. I love Shepard, and I do wish he could have a great career with the Giants, but I'm with you there. I don't see him on, in general football for another 4 years, maybe not even another 3 years. And it is a sad thing to think about, but props to Shepard for coming back. I guess it takes a lot of guts to actually come back, especially when you have everybody telling you, your closest people to you,
and hopefully that's not the case.
Retire.
I don't want to think
not worth
poorly,
it.
but I do think if he has a few more concussions this year, my guess is he probably will retire early. I could be wrong, and I hope that's not the case. I know he got paid, right? He got a second contract, so he's not playing for money at this point. Obviously he wants to get another contract, but he's probably financially stable. Hopefully he goes out there, he plays well this year, and he's a big part of the offense. If he's healthy, I do think he's a really good wide receiver. I don't think he's a number one. I think he's a very good number 2 when he's on the field. And that's one thing that, I do think the Giants have enough weapons. I really do. I think like a lot of people look at it and they're like, oh, they don't. I think when this team's healthy, Evan Ingram's, the problem is he's not healthy, but Evan Ingram is as talented as any tight end in terms of catching. I shouldn't say catching, but getting open. Sterling Shepard, when he's healthy, is a good receiver. Obviously, Barkley's a dual threat. I think they have Darius Slayton, Golden Tate. They have the weapons to be a solid offense if you can get this offensive line in order.
That's exactly what I've been saying for months. I've been saying this on my channel for months. I even made a video saying, like, straight up just about the wide receiving core for the Giants. It's good. It's enough. It has what we need. The problem is they have to stay healthy. But when they're on that field together, they're up there for, one of the most prolific. They could be one of the most prolific offenses if everybody's healthy on there. Ingram, once again, going back to the health, but he's been working on his game, each offseason that happens with him. After his rookie year, he worked on his blocking. He's still not great at it, but he continues to work on it. After his second year, he worked on having a bit more secure hands. We saw him make some incredible catches this past year with Daniel Jones when he was actually on the field. That 75-yard run from Tampa Bay. I think he had like a diving touchdown. Like he caught the ball and then he like dove into the end zone against the Cowboys week 1. Like when these guys are on the field and they're healthy, we have more than enough weapons. The only reason I've sort of been coming around on maybe we need another wide receiver is purely because they can't stay healthy.
The one thing I will say, we don't really have a tall threat unless they're going to use Ingram more on the outside, which I've read reports that they might do that. That's one thing I'll say. And yeah, you kind of need an insurance policy for Sterling Shepard. And I never, that's why I didn't like Golden Tate. I like Golden Tate. I think Golden Tate's one of the better slot receivers in the league. He's good after the catch, good locker room guy. But he's similar to Shepard. They're both 5'10". They're both guys that are going to make a living over the middle. It was a guy I didn't think we needed. And if we didn't have Tate, it would make it. But like I said, to be fair, we didn't know we were going to end up with Slayton in the 5th round. You didn't know what you had. But I think had Gettleman and the Giants known that they were going to find Darius Slayton in the 5th round last year and he was going to turn out to be what he did in his rookie year, I don't think they signed Golden Tate.
I agree with you there. And do you think there's a chance Tate might restructure his contract? Now, if I'm Tate, obviously I won't do it. In fact, if you're any player in the NFL, I don't see a reason for you as a player to restructure your contract because you're either going to be losing money or you're going to be in the potential to lose money because the team could cut you before, let's say they start backloading your contract, they could cut you before that and whatnot. But do you think there's any chance that we somehow restructure Tate's contract, or you think we're just going to ride it out, or we're maybe going to ride it out for one more year and then release him or trade him?
I would say no. If they're going to restructure anybody's contract, I would say actually Zeitler. Because if you look on Zeitler's contract, he's only a $2 million hit next year. So they could probably, if they were to cut him, which I don't think they will, but they could probably restructure that contract to free up a little more money this year if they wanted to. The only reason to do that, obviously, is if you're looking to make one more big move. And they might be, especially after the details that came out today. But yeah, I don't think they'd restructure Tate. They could cut Tate next year, though.
The thing about Zeitler, and I love Zeitler a lot, I honestly think he's probably the best offensive lineman that we have right now. And I've been seeing it a lot, since the moment that we got him in that trade, is his age. The thing with me is, with offensive linemen, I don't put too much stock into age because guys play into their late 30s most of the time with offensive linemen. And I think Zeitler has the potential to do so. Like, I know there's been talks about, hey, maybe in a few years down the line, we need to get a new right guard. In my opinion, we could ride out Zeitler for like another 4 or 5 years, maybe. I believe he has the potential to be a great,
I don't
right guard deep into his
maybe
career.
Not great, but definitely a more than adequate guard. You look at Jason Peters. Jason Peters is 38, 39 years old. So there are definitely guys that play at least until the mid-30s at that position. Yeah, and Zeitler, to my knowledge, has not had a bad injury history. So, that's definitely a possibility. And Zeitler, for as bad as his surrounding, Zeitler played really well. When you factor in, because like we said earlier, an offensive line is only as good as the sum of their parts. So you can't expect one individual to play great when you have, bad players all around you on an offensive line. So for the parts that he had, for him to end up with the grade he did, he played pretty well for the Giants.
Exactly. And during those first 3 or 4 games, the offensive line as a whole, like the first 3 or 4 games of the 2019 season, were the biggest catfish in the world, because those first 3 or 4 games, they were ranked top 5, not top 10, top 5 in both run and pass protection. And then something happened and they just declined and got, by that standard of being top 5 to going out to the 20s, you got terrible. What do you think happened there? I have no idea what happened. But if you go back and you look at these rankings and these stats, they were
You want
top
my
5
honest
in pass
opinion, and
and
I'm
run
not trying
protection
to
for
bash him. I know some people may view me as
2019.
bashing him. I think Daniel Jones is the reason why that offensive line regressed when it did. And that has nothing to do with bashing Daniel Jones. It has everything to do with an inexperienced rookie quarterback taking over for a guy that's been in the league for 17 years or 16 years, whatever it was. Eli Manning, if nothing else, obviously was much better at reading opposing defenses with pre-snap reads and stuff like that for the simple reason he's been doing it for 20 years. Daniel Jones had never been put into a game before. I thought that they rushed him a little bit, especially being that you had a veteran quarterback on the roster. Probably could have done him better to sit on the bench for 3 or 4 more games. And I think that had as much to do with anything else to do with the regression in the offensive line play. Because like you said, I remember doing a video on the first 2 weeks, the Giants offensive line was in the top 2 or 3 in the league. And I'm not saying they would have maintained that pace, but I do think that they dropped due in large part to the fact of the quarterback change, because the quarterback has a lot to do with how an offensive line plays, with how he does things pre-snap, things like that. I think they would have had a better performance had they waited maybe 3 or 4 more weeks to put Daniel Jones in. The other thing I'll say is when Eli stepped in for those 2 weeks, you remember when Daniel Jones came back, Daniel Jones played much better. And I think having those 2 games in terms of, pre-snap reads and things like that, and I think having those 2 games to sit and learn behind Eli actually did him a world of good at the end of the season.
I can't believe that slipped past my mind, because that makes a lot of sense. Like, it even lines up with the timeline. Jones stepped in week 3. Offensive line started regressing around week 3, I'd say week 4. It really does match up. And, like, you know what, Chris, you're right. And for anybody that thinks he's bashing Jones, it's not, because, like, forget the fact that he's a rookie. Is the fact that it's an unfamiliar quarterback commanding the presence of the pocket in there also plays into it. Yeah, Jones does not clearly have the 16 years of experience that Eli had with, knowing reads, with knowing how to, basically move in the pocket better and all that. It's also just that the offensive line was definitely unfamiliar with him. They don't have the snaps with him that they had with Eli during the offseason, during OTAs. They don't have that familiarity, that chemistry with Jones. That's actually a really good point. I didn't even think about that.
During the season, when they started to regress it, because the first 2 weeks, not only were they ranked really high, you look at the 2 defenses they played, the Cowboys were thought to be going into the year at least one of the top 7, 8, 9, 10 defenses, and the Buffalo Bills. Buffalo Bills had one of the top 3 or 4 defenses in football last year. So I do think it had a lot to do with it. And it's actually a reason to be encouraged for this upcoming year, because I do think Daniel Jones is going to get much better at that this year. And like I said, when he got hurt and sat for 2 weeks, I remember it was visually obvious, especially that first game back. I know the last game he struggled a bit, but it was raining, it was bad conditions. That first game back against the Redskins, granted it's the Redskins, but the Redskins defense isn't abysmal. I remember.
And the Redskins, they were playing to win that game. People love to forget that the Redskins were definitely in that game to win it.
Visually obvious that, he was better at that than he was throughout the course of the year, that he was reading the defense better, things like that. So I am actually encouraged that even if we didn't add a great offensive lineman, that the offensive line is going to be better this year. I'm not saying it's going to be all world, but I think it'll be better this year for that reason alone. You have a more experienced quarterback, and I do think Colombo's a very good offensive line coach. So those 2 factors alone, I'm not saying we're going to be above average without bringing in, sufficient pieces, but I think we'll be better, yes.
We're going to be better. I agree with you there. Like, listen, some Giants fans think it's hard to be a Giants fan right now. It's dark times. But if you really just go through it a little bit, there's a lot to be positive about. Like, Daniel Jones coming in, like you said, another year under his belt, just knowing how to command the pocket more automatically makes that side of the ball a little bit better. What makes it even more better and for you to have a bit more hope. And like I said, I'm the same with you. Like, I don't want to put too much stock into it. But if we take, and I really find it hard to believe that we won't address the offensive line in the draft, that's another reason the O-line gets better. And then also, one thing I want to ask you, what kind of leap do you think DJ is going to take his second year? Because the past couple of years, it's shown
really
that quarterbacks usually take a leap rather than a step back in their sophomore year.
If it was the same exact circumstances as last year, I would say it's going to be a huge leap. And I still hope it's going to be a huge leap. And I still think it's possible it's going to be a huge leap. But let's factor in a couple of things. Coronavirus. I don't think it's going to have a huge effect. May have an effect on the first game or 2. So, yeah, because the fact that OTAs are going to be pushed back.
I want to get into that a little bit, but I'll continue.
Studying and things like that. I think that'll have a very minor effect. But the bigger effect that I think needs to be accounted for from a lot of Giants fans, at least the first 3 or 4 weeks, he's learning a completely new offense. and it's almost like he's a rookie again. Not saying he is, but it's not like he's going into the year being incredibly comfortable. Okay, I knew Shermer's offense. I'm ready to go. I don't need to learn a completely new playbook. Get home, and it's not just him. The players on the team got to learn the new system too. So that needs to be factored in as well. But I do think he could take a big leap.
All right, that's the good point there with the completely new offense. I think, listen, I think there's definitely gonna be a learning curve. I'm not sure if it's gonna be, like something huge. I think he could handle it, right? I also think that while it's not a similar offense to what he did in Duke, the one thing it incorporates more that's similar to what he did in college was the deep passing routes, right? Because what Garrett does a lot more is running, of course. I think that's going to take a little bit of pressure off of Jones, actually, in terms of just, having to share the load a bit with Barkley. But because of those, the deep passing route types of thing that comes with Garrett's offense, and Jones dealt with that, quite a bit in Duke, I think maybe he'll have not an easy transition per se, but a smoother one than one might expect.
To really lean on Saquon Barkley, especially early in the year, and they should. You draft this guy second overall. I really think they're going to lean on Saquon Barkley, and if Barkley, if they give him holes, I think the Giants could be a lot more competitive than people think. Now, I'm trying to be, conservative in my predictions and things like that. But if they can run the ball effectively on a consistent basis, that's only going to help your defense. That's only going to help your quarterback. So I think a lot of, how well Daniel Jones and the team's going to progress this year has to do with Saquon Barkley in the run game.
I agree with you. If they use Barkley for what they drafted him for, once again, people with short-term memory forget that running back was a need for the Giants. Was it the biggest need in 2018? Arguable. I wouldn't say it was the biggest need. I'd probably put offensive line there. But it was a need when they took Barkley because our running game was non-existent for, at that point, maybe 6 or 7 years. Barkley, if they used him what he drafted for, and like you said, effectively and consistently, the two key words here, the Giants are going to be in business, at least on offense. It helps the offensive line. It helps out DJ, helps the wide receivers. It commands more attention from the defense. If it's an effective running game, they pay more attention to Saquon a bit, and maybe the receivers get loose a little bit more. In general, I really hope, and I know they're going to use him more just because, once again, of Garrett's system. If it could work out, we'll be cooking.
I always point to the 2016 Cowboys, and I hate to do that. But the 2016 Cowboys, you go back, I remember, that team went 13-3. But you go back at the preseason expectations for that team. That team, if I remember correctly, was not very good the year before. Tony Romo gets hurt in the preseason. Going into and their defense was not thought to be that good going into the year. So going into the year, nobody thought that was going to be a playoff team. Then that offensive line is otherworldly. They run the ball with Zeke, and the defense plays a lot better because of it. They didn't have the most talented defense back then. They had an okay defense, but they played a lot better because instead of having to be on the field for 32 or 33 minutes, they're on the field for 27 because they were able to run the ball and control the clock. And if the Giants could become that type of team, I'm not saying they're going to go 13-3, but it could make the defense a much better unit than a lot of people think, for the simple reason that they're on the field a lot less.
Man, I remember watching the 2016 Cowboys first game of the year, Giants-Cowboys, which seems to be the first game of the year every year now. But I remember watching that game, and I was thinking the same thing. I was like, weren't they supposed to be like bottom of the, or at least near to bottom of the league this year? But it was a competitive game, and they won the time of possession that game, even though the Giants came out on top. The only reason the Giants came out on top, and I guess you could say for most of that 2016 season, was their defense and, quick passes by Eli. But that Cowboys team, one thing they did better than anybody else was win time of possession, and that plays such a big role in the NFL.
But to be able to do
if we could win time of possession through Barkley, we'll be in good shape.
Pro offensive linemen, so that plays a huge factor in it.
That is true. That is
so
true.
Adamant about trying to take an offensive lineman early in this year.
And speaking of Cowboys, you know what? Let me go with offensive line first, then I'll get to Cowboys, right? So offensive line, I think. Well, who do you think we're going to take? We know there's reports out there about Wirfs. We know that really he's the one guy that has had most connections to the Giants through reports saying that the Giants love him and whatnot. Who do you think the coaches love, and who do you think Gettleman loves? Because I think it's two different dudes. I think the coaches would like somebody like Jedrick Wills because of, how technically sound he is. Maybe they like Christian Wirfs because that's what the reports say. I personally like Andrew Thomas, but then I think Gettleman would like somebody like Mekhi Becton because of his size. Yeah, that's true. That is true. But
If they're
offensive
going
line
to
wise, who do
offensive
you think,
line,
where does it land? Who
I mean,
likes
they
who?
like you
What do you
said, they
think
could
might
really go with
happen?
anybody. They really could. Gettleman doesn't care. If Gettleman thinks Becton's the best, he's going to take him. If he has full say. Now, I will say I don't think he has full say anymore. I think that the coaching staff definitely is involved in this. If I had to guess, you've definitely read the reports about Wirfs. And one thing we've learned about the New York Giants, when things start to leak, whether it's about firing somebody or drafting or trading, it tends to happen, right? The reports leak. Yeah,
Seen reports were
yeah,
leaking before
exactly.
the draft we were going to take Saquon, and of course
So
last
that is
year
why
reports
I've
did come
talked
out that we
about
were going to
in
take
my
Daniel
mock
Jones.
drafts recently, I've had them taking Wirfs. But the one thing I will point to, connections, right? Everything's about familiarity, connections, connections, connections. Where did Joe Judge coach originally in college? He coached at Alabama. Whose opinion does he respect a lot more probably than a lot of other people? Nick Saban. Who did Nick Saban coach? Jedrick Wills. So Jedrick Wills, if you watch the tape, what a lot of people say, a lot of people think he's the most well-rounded offensive lineman in this year's class when you factor in both run and pass protection. I would say I'm starting to lean that they may take Wills. I could be wrong. And Andrew Thomas is definitely in the discussion. I really don't think they'll take Becton unless they trade down.
While I do love Thomas, and my favorite is Thomas, one thing I'm starting to realize because I'm looking at like more tape now more than ever, my favorite isn't who I think is the best. I do think the best offensive lineman in this class is Wills because of his just sound technical ability. But also one thing people don't realize, while Wills played right tackle in Alabama at the college level, that was because Tua is a left-handed guy. So he was protecting Tua's blind side in a way. So I do think he has the ability to play left tackle. We bring him in, maybe at his rookie year, let him start at right tackle, ease the transition into left tackle
I
his
completely
second
agree
year.
with you.
That
Left-handed
would be
quarterback.
like an
That's why he
almost
played the
perfect
right
scenario
tackle,
for
and
me.
that's perfect. It's you can't really lose there because you already have your left tackle with Solder for one more year. You keep him there. A lot of people have talked about shifting Solder over. If Solder's going to be here and he's going to start, leave him where he is. I know that the left side's much more important. I get it, the blind side protector. But at the end of the day, defenses nowadays do a lot more different things than they used to. If they think that they could exploit the right side, they're going to put their best pass rusher on the right side. So leave him there. Hernandez is familiar playing with Solder. Don't mess that up for this year. If he's going to be on the team, leave him on the left side. You put Wills on the right. Then, if you're going to cut Solder the following year, you have two options. You could either A, draft another tackle that you think could be an elite left tackle, put him there, or B, you ship Wills over, you draft a right tackle, or you sign a right tackle, or you sign a left tackle. So they'll have a lot of options in the following offseason. But because of Solder's familiarity with Hernandez playing on that left side, even though it's not the best of history, knowing that Solder's going to be in the starting lineup, I would actually leave him on the left side.
I agree with you. I would leave him on the left side for those reasons, and also because, like you said, defenses don't do what they used to. You shift them over to the right side. Let's say he takes some time to get used to it. That's a bad thing. You don't want your offensive lineman to take a couple of games to get used to his new position. Yeah, it's a similar position, but I don't think it's going to be where he's expecting, the lesser of the pass rushers coming there. It's probably going to be the greater of the pass rushers.
I completely agree.
So you don't want to risk that either.
If you shifted Solder over to the right, now you're asking Wills to play a different position than he played last year, and you're asking Solder to play a different position than he played last year. It just wouldn't make sense. I would leave him on the left side. So, yeah, I think you're absolutely right.
Yeah, so let's get into, I guess, the NFC East, like I said, with the Cowboys. Maybe it's too early to judge, right? Maybe it's just too early to say. But do you think Giants won free agency for the NFC East? Because, I'm going to let you do it. Can you just break down what the other teams did? And would you say the Giants won free agency for the NFC
leading up into free agency, I did not want them to sign multiple 5-year deals. I wouldn't have been upset with one. So I like the approach the Giants took. They thought about the future, and they brought in guys that fill holes. I think Nick Martinez got bashed a little bit more than he deserved to when we first brought him in. He did have a lot more success. If you go back and look at the tape, you look at his PFF grade, you look at everything, he was much better with Patrick Graham, and he expressed that in his interview yesterday. So I do think Martinez could be at least a moderate upgrade to Ogletree. I would say, I think he's going to be a better player. And I do think that Bradbury at this stage in his career is better than Janoris Jenkins. So I think they definitely upgraded their team, and I like that both were 3-year deals. I definitely think the Giants had a pretty solid offseason. If I'm going to be fair with the Cowboys didn't have a lot of money to spend because they know they got to set aside money for Dak Prescott. They had to bring back Amari Cooper. Those were givens. They had to do that. So obviously they lost some pieces. They lose Byron Jones. They lose Robert Quinn. They lose Randall Cobb. But I think that the Cowboys actually did a pretty good job with the limited cap space they had at filling in some of those holes. They got McCoy. They brought in Poe. They made nice cost-effective moves. So for the cap space they had, I think the Cowboys did a pretty decent job at staying afloat. I do think that they took a little step back in the talent department. Um, and then the Eagles, yeah, for this year, they brought in nice impact players. Darius Slay, they make a trade, but again, for me as a Giants fan, I'm happy with what the Eagles did because the Eagles continue to ignore their future. As a Giants fan, we're not going to win this year. We're not going to win a Super Bowl this year. Let the Eagles continue to destroy their future. They give up a third, they give up a fifth, they tie up more cap space. Then they sign the D tackle from the Steelers. That definitely helped their team this year. But you're committing another $13 million a year on a 3-year deal to him. Eagles are going to be in cap hell next year and going forward. So this year, I would actually say the Eagles might have improved their team the most, but I think they hurt their team for the future the most as well. I think the Redskins did a pretty good job in signing cost-effective deals. I like the Fuller, the signing on the slot corner. They made nice small moves. They didn't do anything splashy. The Giants definitely brought in more talent than they did. But I think the Redskins and Giants had a good approach for where their teams are right now. I think overall, I think that the Giants, you could definitely argue at the best offseason when you factor in not just this year, but the next 3 or 4 years.
I agree with you there. Especially on the point with the Eagles. Short-term wise, Eagles, I mean, if you want to put the win label on it, I'd say I'd give it to them. Short-term wise, the Eagles, they had a better offseason. You could see how it would help their team immediately. Long-term wise, not so much for anybody else but the Giants, in my opinion. It really comes down to cap space. It comes into the age of the players they brought in, the type of players they brought in, type of contracts. So I'm definitely with you on that point.
The Redskins have a really bright future if they could get that quarterback fixed because they're going to get Chase Young. They've got over $120 million in cap space next year. If they can fix the quarterback, Redskins are going to be very good. No, I'm not saying this year maybe, but down the line.
If they can, yeah, I agree with you. If they can fix the quarterback and if they can that's really all they need, right? Like you look at it, their pass rush is going to improve and it's already an average good pass rush.
They can use a weapon. Another one.
Other than quarterback, probably the weakest point in the Redskins team might be another one other than Scary Terry. I was going to say probably cornerbacks, but then, you think about it, overall, their defensive backfield is good. But yeah, I'd probably go weapon.
Yeah, I think they could use a weapon, whether it's a tight end, whether it's a wide receiver. Terry McLaurin's really good, but that's really all they have.
They definitely need another tight end, especially after what they've been through with Jordan Reed. Was Evan Ingram the next Jordan Reed?
But, people
I have no idea
about
anymore.
Jordan Reed. I remember Jordan Reed was a stud. And people would always be like, he's going to be all right. And then he played 10 games. And then the next year he played 8 games. And he never stayed healthy. And I hope that's not the case. But obviously, over his first 3 years, it's trending that way.
Exactly, man. But I would hate to end it on a dark note. But I am going to run out of time soon. Once again, Chris, thank you for coming on.
Yeah,
it's been a lot of fun. Just talking general football. It's been pretty good, man. Giants' future looked good, man.
Again, and hopefully, hopefully everything works out with the draft and everything else, and the Giants get, going in the right direction.
Yeah, man. Same here. Well, once again, guys, the Entertainah's links is down below if you somehow don't know about this guy. Not only go subscribe to him on YouTube, follow him on Twitter. He retweets really important stuff sometimes, and in general, that's how you get your notifications. Trust me, YouTube doesn't notify you all the time, so Twitter is the way to go. Once again, Chris, thank you for coming on, and we're out, guys. Alright, guys, thanks for watching. Put your comments down below. Make sure you smash that like button, subscribe, and turn on post notifications. Until next time, I'm out.